northern side of the Central Business District, right on the corner of Vails Mill Road and University Boulevard, right across the street from the Wheaton Mall. So we're taking advantage of the fact that we're at a very popular corner just at the entry of the CBD. Now to zoom in a little bit further and talk about the different components that make up this site is an assemblage. So the parcel that you're seeing in red is the Lindsay Ford, formerly the Lindsay Ford property. And the site in the blue that you're seeing was the former Ambassador Hotel, which both HOC and Wilco had some ownership stake in. And then the final piece that you see on the very corner of Veers and University, it was the former Mattress Firm location that was owned and operated by Wilco, or owned by Wilco. And together, this is an assemblage that we're pulling together to create the 5-acre site that will be the future home of the Wheaton Gateway Development Project. Now to talk briefly about project goals. Obviously, we want to create a synergistic use of mixes, whether things that complement the residential portions of our building well, as we use some of the commercial portions of our building. So we want to create a vibrant and healthy community from that respect. We are a mixed income project, so we're trying to focus on a range of incomes to make sure we can promote diversity in terms of the affordability that's on the site, which is a concept that HOC has employed in our sister project at Hillendale. We want to design the project to high levels of sustainability and resilience, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means more specifically in a few future slides. And then we want to develop and provide spaces that benefit the broader community. Our open spaces, we try to program to make sure that it's inclusive of the different members of the community, and we're keeping some context as to how the demographic within Wheaton would use those different facilities. And we're a multimodal site, right? We're transit oriented, but we try to focus on a range of transportation options, whether it be bike, pedestrian, bus rapid transit, which is the local bus line that is coming to right in front of our doorstep at Wheaton Gateway. In addition to vehicles, even though there is a push to reduce the amount of vehicles, I still think that we need to plan and consider that because it is a future state that is not quite here yet, and we need to make sure we're prepared for now and not just the future. Obviously, we want to make it a visually appealing project, right? We're right at the northern end of the CBD, and as you're coming south on Veers Mill Road, we're going to be one of the first commercial properties that you're seeing. So our goal is to design something that is attractive and it creates an entrance into the Central Business District for Wheaton. As far as accessibility, we're trying to focus on making sure that we're being inclusive from an accessibility standpoint. So whether it be ADA or universal design, we want to make sure we capture a broad range of capabilities or a broad range of abilities by the way we program, design, and implement things on our project. And we're striving for best value. And I think what that means is that we're trying not to focus solely on first cost. You heard me echo several times that we're long-term holders. And sometimes the decisions that we make aren't just for right now because it's cheaper. Sometimes it's a little bit more costly, but it's going to benefit the project 10, 15, 20 years from now. And we try to keep that lens on when we're making decisions about the project because we think it's in the best interest for the parties that are involved with the projects in addition to the residents. And as far as designing the project, we try to focus on human health and wellness. I think the pandemic has passed, but we still sort of feel the impacts of it, or at least it affects the way we think. And trying to make sure that if we're ever in a situation where people have to be in their homes for an extended period of time, we want to make sure that that's not an uncomfortable situation. We've heard about people who've lived in homes or apartment buildings that have poor indoor air quality and a multitude of other things, don't have access to balconies. And we're trying to keep these things into consideration if we're ever faced with a scenario like that again, that our residents can have a comfortable living environment. And finally, we want to make sure that we have a broad range of amenities. You heard me talk about the park and things that are open to the general public, but even the amenities that we're programming within the building, we're trying to make sure that we can capture things like we have a building that we're considering to make senior affordable. We're still thinking about where that fully lands, but I think we're programming amenities that will suit older generations. We're programming amenities that are attractive to younger folks in the building. So we're trying to make sure that all age ranges are considered when we're programming and conceptualizing these amenities that we're putting into the building. So that underpins sort of the project goals. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our development approach, and the diagram you're going to see here is called the triple bottom line. Again, this is something that at PSV, we sort of use it to underpin the way we think about development at all times. And we try to impart this same thinking into our development partners as well. And what it essentially means is that we're building a building that is better than code minimum. Better than code minimum for the people who occupy the buildings, meaning our residents and the surrounding community. Well, not just occupying our buildings, the residents and the surrounding community. Better for the planet, and hence our focus on our sustainability goals, health and wellness. And buildings that are more profitable. And when I say profitable, it's from the perspective of these buildings being affordable buildings, and the way we're approaching it with a mixed income approach. What we're doing is trying to make sure that the market rate portions of the building are generating enough income to support the affordable components of this building. And again, I mentioned that we're trying to achieve very high levels of affordability in this building. We're targeting up to 40% site-wide. So we're taking this approach to make sure that we're not in a scenario that has been found in the past where there's deeply affordable buildings, but it's very difficult from an operational perspective to support those buildings. So we're trying to create a scenario with a mix of incomes that allows the market rate affordable portions of the building to help support the affordable and make sure the building can stand and operate on its own for the long term. So again, this is sort of the ethos that PSV takes when we approach development. And again, this is what we try to impart on the team, and this is what sort of dictates the way we think and we approach about projects. So you've heard me mention it several times, better than code minimum. Just graphically, so you understand the context there, everything on the left of this gray line is a code minimum building. Whether it's the International Building Code, the International Energy Conservation Code, these are the things that are the basics that you need to satisfy in order to build a code-compliant, occupiable building in Montgomery County. Everything to the right is what we are doing that are above and beyond that requirement. So whether it's Indoor Air Plus or the Well Health Safety Rating, whether it's LEED, I think most people have probably heard about LEED, we're targeting the highest levels of LEED, or even Energy Star. We are really targeting very stringent goals in terms of sustainability. I think most importantly, the one that we're targeting is the one you'll see to the far right, which is Passive House certification. It's probably one of the most rigorous science-based building standards that really dictate how human health, wellness, how the health, wellness, sort of how comfort is felt in the building, and in terms of energy efficiency. It's probably one of the most rigorous standards that you'll find out there. And it's not easy to achieve, but we've made that a target for this building because we believe that building a better building is impactful to everyone. Oh. Okay. Thank you. No worries. I would listen. You're doing your part. We appreciate it. So in addition, so I've talked about project goals, I've talked about sustainability goals, and now I want to talk about county objectives. I think everything that you see on the screen is a different plan that member of staff who sit in this building have come up with, right? Whether it be the Wheaton CBD plan, the Complete Streets Guideline, the Bicycle Master Plan, Drive Montgomery, you name it. All of these different plans have different requirements about what the county would like to see in buildings that are built in the future. So we highlight this just to say, in addition to our project goals, our sustainability goals, we also have to balance these county objectives as well. And as you can imagine, with a project of this size, that is a lot of information to take in, distill, and try to make sure that we're satisfying. It's a lot of balancing that we have to do as a team. And I think it speaks back to the fact that we try to curate a team that we think are best suited to help us achieve these goals. So again, this is just to highlight the fact that we are juggling a lot. We're taking on the task and we're doing it to the best of our ability, but we are striking a balance between all of these things that I've mentioned over the past 3 or 4 slides. All right, now to talk a little bit about the project status. For those who haven't joined us for a meeting before, I'll give you a brief rundown of the history up until this point and talk to some extent about what we think in terms of the path moving forward. So ever since we kicked off the project in 2019, we went out to a series of community groups, the Kensington View Civic Association, we've spoken to WUDAC and other groups as well, just to sort of initiate and say, hey, this is a project that we're in very early stages, but we also want to make sure we receive your feedback. So that was what we did in 2019. And as part of our efforts to sort of prepare the site and let the community know that we're starting to take steps in the right direction, we demolished the Ambassador Hotel, and that happened in early 2020. Then moving on, we started the entitlement process by doing a concept plan review. Again, that is not a formal part of the entitlement process, it's elective, but we chose to do it because it gave us an opportunity to engage with staff, get their feedback, and try to work in concert with them to getting towards the finish line, which would ultimately be our site plan approval. So we completed that in 2020 and then moved on to the sketch plan review, which we're now doing an amendment for, but the original sketch plan was approved in 2022. And then since the sketch plan, we're now working on our preliminary plan of subdivision, on our site plan, which has been submitted since the last community meeting that we had with you guys. I think late last year in November, we did that. And then we're also now, for this meeting, pursuing an amendment to our sketch plan to bring all of those plans back into alignment. So that is our current phase, and our current target is to finish that in Q4 of this year. From there, we'll move on to actually designing the project for construction documents for permitting while we're pursuing, and that'll probably take about 6 plus or minus months or so, and then we'll go into DPS and submit for permit to try and secure a permit for the building. Obviously, we think that's going to take us through the balance of 26 and put us in a position in early 27 in Q1 or Q2 to begin construction on the first phase.
Can you just clarify one thing quickly? Once you go to the board in Q4,
yes.
Is that the last time you have to go to the board, or do you still have to submit a final subdivision and another plan before you move on?
That would be the last time we're going to the board. And I think after that, we have to do a record plat, which is part of the process, and then we're able to move into the permitting process, et cetera. So yeah, that would be the final time we have to come in front of the planning board. So yeah, that sort of wraps up our construction commencement would start in Q1, Q2, and we anticipate it's probably going to be plus or minus 36 months to get through the phase one of construction. Phase one consists of 2 buildings, and I'll give you guys more concept with a little context with a visual here in the next slide or so. All right, so now to talk briefly about our approved sketch plan. This is just to show you what was approved back in 2022. The numbers that you're seeing up here are obviously dated, right? We're doing an amendment for a reason, but this is where we were at 2022 in terms of retail, residential square footage, building height, et cetera. As I mentioned, we're focusing on the phase one of a 2-phase program, right? So phase one contains the buildings that we call section 1 and section 2. Those will be the first 2 buildings that happen in the first phase, and the second phase at a later date will be the section 3 building. So again, that's a 2-phase, 3-section program that we're pursuing here with the target of doing the first 2 buildings at the same time. And just a little bit of a rendering to understand where our approved sketch plan was. This is an interim condition. Now, things have progressed in terms of the corner of University and Veers. We are actually pursuing in our site plan program in the short term. In the interim, until we bring that final building online, it's almost like a community park. It's going to have benches, walkways, opportunities for the community to engage, potentially have food trucks or maybe farmers markets, things of that nature. We figured until the point where we have comfort that the 3rd building is ready to progress, we think that space is better used for the community, for them to have access to it. This is just an understanding of what that full built-out concept would be with that second phase, section 3 building fully completed. Again, we're just going to rotate around to the corner of East and University. So you'll see the section 2 building, the lower building that borders on the residential neighborhood, more prominently in the forefront, top left-hand corner, and the 2 taller buildings that are fronting on the section 1 building, which is fronting on Veers, and the section 3 building, which is at the corner of Veers and University. Again, just another final rotation around to the corner of East and Kensington Boulevard, so you can see that section 2 building a little bit more prominently. And this view is just giving you an understanding from the street. We like to throw this in just because you can understand the transition that's involved, and this is dictated by zoning, by the way. But this is our Section 2 building at the time of our approved sketch plan. But what you can tell is that from the buildings across the street, which are residential buildings, we're sort of respecting the height transition. We're not jumping to a 11-story or 12-story tall building immediately. I think by zoning code, we're required to sort of transition to a more residential scale building before stepping it up to the more dense portions of the site. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about the increased density I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So again, these are more numbers, obviously. This table at the top sort of represents where we were previously at our previous community meeting. But what we have since done, and this is during our site and preliminary plan of subdivision and our sketch plan amendment, is we've updated these numbers on the second table. This just identifies sort of maximums that we anticipate or we're entitling on this site. So what has changed is you'll see at the bottom is that we have increased the amount of units in terms of total units, not affordable units, but total units. And the Section 1 building, we've added an additional 11 units. The Section 2 building, an additional 3. And we actually came down in units on the Section 3 building, which is going to be on the corner of Veers and University. And it seems counterintuitive. The reason why that number went down is because we actually included larger units. So more multi-generational units, larger, either biasing towards 2 or 3 bedroom units, which effectively means it's taking a more residential area, but it's still only counting as a unit. So that's the reason why you sort of see that mismatch. But again, we're only programming at maximum 800 units for the site. And again, this is consistent information that we shared last October at the last community meeting. Another step further, just to see, this slide really just highlights where we were in terms of sort of overall commercial and residential square footage and building height, right? So what you will see is that we've gone from, in the Section 1 building, an 11-story building to a 12-story building. So that additional affordability allowed us some additional density, which meant we were able to go a little bit higher on our building, right? We are afforded additional building height because we crossed a different threshold in terms of the amount of affordability. So we recaptured that in terms of an additional floor. Now, in the Section 2 building, what you will notice is that hasn't changed. It's still the same 6-story building. You heard me talking about that transition from the residential neighborhood. We're trying to be respectful of that. Just because we're allowed the additional density and additional height, we're not taking advantage of it because we thought that it was important to respect that transition. However, on the third and final building, we are increasing by another floor there and going from what was 13 floors to 14 floors at that corner building. Although the building in actual height doesn't change that much, and that's because amenity floors that had double height spaces, we sort of reconfigured things within the building that didn't necessarily push us up much higher, like another 12 feet or so in building height, but we were able to capture that density through creative architecture. All right, this is just a diagram just indicating where the maximum allowable heights were. So this is sort of a before where we were allowed. The building on the left, you see at 124 feet. This is on East Avenue. That is actually our Section 1 building. And the building on the right is the building at the corner of University and Veers. So the maximum allowable heights there were 124 feet and 154 feet respectively. And now after the additional density, we're allowed to go up another 12 feet, 12 and a half feet. So we're at 136 feet for the Section 1 building and 166 feet on the Section 3 building. But we didn't, even though we were allowed to go higher in that building on the corner of Veers and University, we didn't recapture that. Again, we took advantage of some creative architecture to recapture the residential area and the density without actually pushing the limits of height. Again, this is just another view, this time with the building fronting. This is us facing Veers Mill Road, an elevation from there. So the building on the left is the Section 3 building, which is our Phase 2, cornering on Veers and University, same 154 max height, and the Section 1 building on Veers. And again, this is just showing that difference in height that's allowable, same 136 feet and 166 feet. Again, all the same information that we presented previously. All right, so now we're getting to the part where it's a little bit different from where we were before. This is talking about the responses to staff comments that we had and how that has impacted what you might have seen in our site plan, our submission that we prepared for site plan. So really, we want to highlight sort of 5 key areas and talk about the differences. First one being up at Kensington Boulevard, second being along East Avenue, third, Section 1 building on Veers, and fourth, our middle private street that runs through the site to connect the interconnecting street. And then finally, we'll go down to University Avenue and talk about some of the changes that staff have comments as how they have impacted our overall site program. So you'll see the previous on the top and the proposed on the bottom, right, of where we are. I'll just sort of highlight at a high level and I'll give a breakdown on the next slide as well. You notice that on Kensington Boulevard, it was a little bit more of a straight shot down from Veers all the way down to Kensington. Now you sort of see it jog. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of WSSC and other utility infrastructure that's in that area. And as a result, we have to stay a certain amount of distance away from it to sort of meet their requirements. So as a result, the stair had to sort of jog into our property a little bit and then follow a little bit more tightly. So that is just sort of a response to sort of requirements by various utility various utilities. What you will see, and again, let's just blow up and look at the proposed. Also, there's a crosswalk that is crossing right, if you can see my mouse, right here. And basically, what we did here was we just adjusted it so that it was crossing at a 90-degree angle. Again, keeping in mind pedestrian safety. I think previously we were coming across that driveway into our building at a bit of an angle. We just tried to make it right angles to shorten that distance to make sure that the pedestrians could get to a refuge or a safer environment sooner. So again, not much change. Obviously, it's impactful to see the way the stair has to jog and hug the building to avoid that infrastructure, but that's the major change that you're seeing at Kensington Boulevard. Moving forward, the next area is along East Avenue. And here, there are a couple things to sort of point out. I think notice that the parking spaces in the top image are closer to Kensington Boulevard. And over the course of commenting with staff, we've reduced it by 1. I think they wanted less parking spaces there. So that was a comment received by staff. And we sort of shifted it towards University Boulevard. So now the parking is biased closer to the entrance of that building. So just to give it so we've reduced the parking count by request to staff. We've shifted the parking spaces closer towards University Boulevard. We've actually created those parking spaces, some of them to be accessible, right? Again, talking about the universal design and accessibility, we made sure that we incorporated those so there's sort of 0 curbs and allow them to access those parking spaces easier for those who may have disabilities. And then we've added a crosswalk and a speed table. So if you look right in front of where this building comes down right at our private street, we actually added a speed table, which is supposed to act as traffic calming to slow down anybody that might be moving too quickly through that neighborhood. So again, another measure to slow down traffic that may be coming through that neighborhood. Sorry, it's over here. Sorry, can you see my mouse? This, not even a little bit, okay. Yeah, I think we're just pointing out the speed table here. So right along this edge. No, not right in front of the bank. So do you know where that Lindsay lot is right now, where they have the cars parked? It's closer in that vicinity, almost right in front of the first house. Well, it spans both sides. So that speed table, if you have the sidewalks here, it's going to fit exactly in between the roadways. So what it does is it forces people to have to slow down to get on top of that speed table and ramp back down. Speed table, how best to describe that? Basically, it's something that they call a traffic calming measure. Do we have?
A little bit of a ramp there, like it's out here.
Yeah. So it just to force people to slow down, yeah. Correct, yeah.
And I'm assuming you didn't remove the trees, they just removed them.
Oh, yeah, this particular plan doesn't, we've actually, I think at the request of staff, had to make sure we added more trees. So the trees haven't been removed at all. Krista? We're good?
Recording in progress.
Okay. Okay, so moving on from East Avenue, here we're on Veers Mill Road. So a couple things here. Oh, we're not seeing the screen? Let me reshare. You're still seeing the previous one? Yeah. Okay, and it's still showing as, yeah.
So I think it's what's being displayed.
Okay, so those at home might be seeing it, we just need to get it on this larger screen. So give us a second here. Sure.
This is the warm-up, he's gonna do all this.
This is just me stretching. Right. I mean, I could talk about it, but I think the picture is gonna be more helpful with the
Actually,
picture.
one-on-one sitting next to you.
Right. It's just. Huh? Okay.
It'll be after.
It's safer, that much. All right. Well, we have bike racks scattered throughout the site. I know you're messing with me. It's okay. All right, so just to move forward to Veers Mill Road, no more questions on East, right? We're good for the moment? All right, so Veers Mill Road, just to talk a little bit about this. So this was, I don't know if you remember from the last community meeting, I sort of came up and said, hey, we're getting comments from staff that we think could have a significant impact on our right-of-way, and we're just trying to ferret it out to see what it is. So I think this is where you see the result of that. So on the top image, we only have 24 feet from the right-of-way, from the street edge to our buildable line, right? Now, staff sort of came in and said, hey, we want you to meet the complete streets guidelines. We thought we had cleared that obstacle, but we sort of had several meetings with them over an extended period of time, and we settled on adding an extra 5 feet to that street section, right? So instead of going 24 feet, it's now 29 feet, and then our building, so we've had to sort of adjust our building, pull the retail face of the buildings back. There's a little bit of overhangs. Huh? Yeah, further in away from the street, right? Correct. No, so that's at the ground level. So we've had to do some of that. But otherwise, we've had to modify our building face a little bit. So in some of the top images, you see it's a little bit more jagged edges along that gray line. It's a little bit more straight in some areas. So essentially, that was sort of the big move there. It was adjusting that right away from the 24 feet to what is now the 29 feet. And also along Veers Mill Road, even though we're only focusing on the northern section closer to Kensington, we came to agreement with staff and we intend to bury the utilities along the frontage of Veers Mill Road, right? So those are going to be the big things that you see as a change.
Sorry, does that include the one that crosses Spears Mill over towards Nick's?
No, that is, we consider that the university leg. So again,
That's the one that's still stuck in the corner, even though you moved it a little bit or whatever.
yeah, we've shifted it just to allow us to sort of,
I thought planning wanted you guys to, were really urging you guys to underground that, even though we know it's very expensive. That one pole.
they are urging us to do that, but in actuality, there's a difference between those utility lines on Veers and the ones on University. The ones on University are same corner, but they're regional lines. They're high voltage lines. They're lines that serve an area far beyond the area of this project. So to bury those that we don't have any impact on or any bearing on, just it feels a little bit like an exaction from staff. So we've been having conversations with them. We're willing to concede on the Veers Mill Road portion of it, but University is just serving far beyond the area of our project, and just a little bit more in terms of burial than we can bear at the project. Anything to add to that? You guys good with that?
No, I mean, that's, and again, that same question came in, that asking applicant to vary. But I think Goyer appropriately stated, also, these exactions, as Goyer's talking about, are governed by constitutional law. There has to be a nexus and a proportionality between these, and we don't think there's any nexus between those regional. Point of what was asked by planning board is that we work with staff to try, like, staff wanted us to vary more, we feel like there's no, but we reached a compromise where I think HOC deserves credit for being willing to go above and beyond what we think would be normally required to vary all of University Boulevard, including the crossing of University Boulevard. So it's not, excuse me, along Veers Mill.
Right.
Including the burial across University. But we're relocating a pole but not burying along University.
Correct.
One of the comments in the chat said that White Flint was required to bury. I live over by White Flint, and they did not, there is not burial over at the new apartments that are off of Nicholson. The lines are right down the road. I live down the street. So maybe there were burials someplace, but that is absolutely not a universal
Thanks, Shane. I guess I'm
application.
just a little confused. So there's lines that go across Veers Mill, and I guess maybe from that same pole or a different pole, that cross University.
Right.
Are they two different poles? Is it all on the same pole, and that's why you can't bury it? Or that's why, because you're talking about crossing University, I'm really talking about crossing the Veers Mill side.
Well, the lines that are crossing Veers are the lines running down University, and those are regional lines. Next time you just go to look up, you'll see an extra set of lines up at the top. It's a different pole. Those are regional lines running down University, crossing Veers.
Gotcha.
What we are burying along our Veers frontage, which would cross University, and we're gonna keep it underground crossing University, and then it will pop back up on the other side.
The CVS side.
Of University. Yeah, so,
Okay. Thank you for
yeah,
clarifying.
we are crossing, but we're just crossing in the line that we're burying.
Right.
Yep.
But you're not touching East Avenue, correct?
No, we're not.
No.
They're gonna be sitting there,
They are there, yes.
even though they're not regional. I mean, they are not further than that block,
Correct.
because staff didn't think we needed it.
Staff was more focused on the primary frontages in front of the building. Yeah, that they didn't, it has come up, but they were more focused on Veers and University for their burials. Next, I want to talk about the private street, what we call the mid-block passage. So this received some updates. Luckily, we were able to accommodate it, and really where it was is that we had larger travel lanes for vehicles, I think closer to 12 feet. Staff asked us to reduce that down to a 10-foot up and down in terms of the lane widths. They asked us to include 8-foot sidewalks and a 6-foot street buffer on either side. So we were able to accommodate that. It forced us to shift the street slightly to one direction to accommodate those requirements, but like I said, we were able to accommodate that. Also, we had some additional conversations about grading that street. Originally, when we had it planned, it was a lot steeper. Yeah, towards the end, coming down towards east. And we worked with our engineer to soften that a little bit and get it within compliance of what staff would like. So it's a little bit gentler. I mean, obviously, coming from Veers Mill Road, getting down to east, it's 20 foot of grade. There's only so much we can do. But again, we were able to soften that a little bit so those transitioning down there wouldn't have such a hard time. And then also, you'll see some garage, right where it says private street, there's a garage entrance on the top of it and the bottom. So that's a garage entrance into our phase 1 is at the top, and our future phase 2 is at the bottom. So those weren't exactly across from each other, and staff wanted us to align those so that the turning movements in and out of the garage were less conflicted. So we were able to accommodate that as well. Next, along University Boulevard, not a significant shift here. Really, where you see most of it is us sort of relocating our transformers Well, again, from our sketch plan, there is a large change. So from our sketch plan, we have separated our service entrance, which is to the far left of this image. This is where loading vehicles, whether it be residents moving in and out or deliveries to the retail spaces, would be coming in. They come in there, they go underground. Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm trying to draw a circle. You seeing where my mouse is? Okay, so that service entrance, that's where deliveries or residents would come in that are moving into the building. They'll go in there, they'll navigate internal to our garage, and then they'll pop out right at the edge of East Avenue before they head back out. So no, we're not dropping them deep closer to Kensington Avenue. We're bringing them closer to where that middle street is. And then the second entrance right here, where you see these sort of green lines crossing in the middle here, that's where the retail and residents would just generally move, come in and out of the garage. So not moving traffic, but just general residents coming in to park their cars because they live in the building, or people that are coming to the retail facilities there. Again, this also had the same comment we had before, going from the 24 feet to the 29 feet. So the buildings did push back a little bit on the ground floor. And then otherwise, we just reconfigured where we had transformers. So if you look in the previous image at the top, these little squares right up in the middle behind the trees, those are transformers bringing electricity to the building. We just reconfigured those and put a bus shelter in a different orientation there. Unfortunately, those boxes aren't represented here on the bottom image, but that area is still generally where they're going to be. So that's essentially the changes on University Boulevard.
Just to clarify, the additional 5 feet
Yes.
allows therefore wider sidewalks and landscaping buffers and.
Right, slightly, like we had a bikeway that sort of expanded because they wanted roll curbs, larger sidewalks, tree panels, things of that nature. So that pedestrian area where bikes and sort of pedestrians interact just got a little bit more expansive.
And since the last meeting, I know Shane, I presume you got the new sidewalks plan to add in?
I think that what you're seeing is widened sidewalks.
Yeah, but they also have specific layouts and suggestions.
I don't know if we've gotten to that level of granularity.
Yeah,
yet, but
we're-
it'll probably come in at the,
I think I forwarded
at
it
the
to you,
improvement
so.
plan. Thank you.
All right, so what happens next? Obviously, this meeting is the impetus of us being able to submit our amendment to the sketch plan, so that is our next step. And we're gonna continue the progress on our site and subdivision plan. So those were submitted to staff in November of last year. We went through an intake process that was a little bit long, but we finally got accepted and they're under review with staff. Actually, just at the end of last week, or beginning of this week, we resubmitted our first round of responses to staff comments. So we're gonna continue to progress the preliminary plan of subdivision and the site plan, and then shortly after, we're gonna be able to submit our sketch plan amendment and bring those all into alignment to get the planning board at Q4 of this year. All right, so that sort of brings us to the end of the presentation. Obviously, I welcome you guys to go to Wheaton Gateway. Both this presentation, previous ones, and any other information is gonna be at that website and available to you. And now we'll just open it to the floor for any other questions that you guys may have.
I do have one quick question in terms of clarification. If Q4 is the next time and last time, you want the, yeah. Sorry. Okay, so for clarification, if in Q4 of this year, you plan to go to the planning board and then they approve theoretically and you move forward,
Correct.
when do you actually present either to the planning board or to the public the details of colors and all of that kind of stuff that you've been promising, you know, once we get away from the blue boxes and all of that in the sketch plan? When do those details ever get presented, or do they not?
So our last meeting, again, that was our site plan and subdivision plan submission. We actually walked through color renderings showing materiality, floor plan, a little bit more layouts of the residential versus commercial areas of the building. So we brought color renderings, which actually showed windows, doors, fenestration, those sort of things in our last presentation.
Okay.
Actually,
I'll go back and look at that presentation, but I don't recall it in the detail that we were really looking for. I think it was kind of, these are our ideas and our thoughts, but, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but
No,
I just don't understand that process. Because
Yeah,
usually that gets presented to the public at some point before, permits are pulled.
Agreed, and I think I think the last time that sort of is that community meeting is the opportunity where it gets presented. Now, obviously, this was what we presented there in this deck. These are the images that we presented at this site and subdivision plan meeting, where we were going through floor plans, potential balconies, windows, doors, things of that nature.
Again,
Yeah.
potential. So that's the question.
I think it's important to note that also, we have presented these, I think they will be, they'll be there before the planning board. I think, we can keep in touch with you, and as we refine that and send them to you, I don't think.
I'm sure there's a process,
Yeah,
and
to
that's why I'm
see.
a little confused. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the process is that it would, the process, sorry, for the record, Shane.
For the
Fuller,
three
yes,
people
sir.
online, right?
Yeah. I think the process is what we did, which is provide the elevations.
Gotcha.
But just as there have been evolution in these frontages, there's also been evolution in those elevations. And so we get comments, for example, we want a heavier bottom and a more distinct bottom, middle, top. In terms of what process that has to then be published in those iterations, I'm not sure that there is a sort of a republication process.
Right.
But again, since we're in communication with you, it's something you'd like to see, then,
Oh,
let's-
community, yeah. Okay, and I don't want to hog the thing. I'm sure other people have comments and questions. In the minimal 5 years that it'll be before we start even talking about phase two and
Yeah,
that building on the corner, you're talking about that green space there. Can you elaborate a little bit more about your thoughts and access to it and that kind of stuff?
I mean, it will be a publicly available space. Again, we don't have any specific programming. We try to maintain flexibility, but we're obviously providing pathways for people to navigate to our site or deeper into the site with our buildings that will be erected. There's lights there. There's a small parking area
Yeah,
where.
sorry, do you want to talk about the change to the interim condition and the parking that was there?
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, I
And
don't have a good
programming,
image.
if people want to
but-
do programming there, where would they go? I mean, then you don't want to hear it from them directly.
I'm
so.
sorry. Repeat that.
If you were programming that space or you were going to do events there and stuff, how, have you figured out how that's going to happen and stuff?
We,
Yeah,
we,
thank you.
We have thought about that. So we have programmed parking areas there, but to be quite frank with you, we had what we thought was a reasonable amount of parking, and staff said, hey, that's too much. We want you guys to shrink that down. So again, we provided the areas for pull-off areas in case food trucks wanted to pull up. And we noticed that they're scattered around the districts right now. That might be a good place for them to congregate. We provided walking paths and spaces off those walking paths in case people want to set up tables and tents to do farmers markets or maybe a flea market or a community fair, something to that effect. So again, we didn't get very specific with the program, but we tried to think of a series of different uses to know that whether WUDAC or any other group, whether Wheaton's Arts Parade wanted to use that space, it was available and flexible enough that they could take advantage of it. So, do we have anything that we could share in terms of interim plan or? Don't know that there's, no, this is an old version of it.
So wait, so you do that on the corner?
Correct.
You mean, okay, so there's like a placekeeper.
Yeah.
That's we're understanding.
Yes, temporary condition until we bring the next building. Yeah.
But my question is, so
Yeah, so I think where you guys so we had originally proposed, and again, we're gonna try to pull up the new condition, we don't have the nice side by side, but we had proposed a few more parking spaces up top for that interim condition.
and they said no.
We were asked to reduce that number of parking spaces, and so, and we understand staff's position, because there's a parking garage there. And so we worked to strengthen the connection between the garage and the interim condition by adding a stairwell and elevator effectively immediately adjacent to the parking in the interim condition area, so that folks who would come in to the garage off of either University or Veers and end up in the deck, in the below grade deck, can go to what will be a very well labeled area and come right up immediately adjacent. And so, again, we understand staff's position because we have this large investment in below grade to take more space. We still left some number of parking spaces
yeah.
up there, and we left the idea, this is pulled up right now, We left an area, we sort of envision food trucks as potentially a programming. Also, you'll notice that
Could
where
you
we have,
zoom in some, Will?
where we have the sidewalks in this sort of cross pattern is how we feel like people likely would want to traverse the area. That's where the foot traffic, we imagine, if you ever look at a college campus and how they look like this because that's where the traffic will end up. But you'll see things like that the stormwater management facilities are offset by 10 feet from those paths, because we could also envision programming where we have 10 by 10 tents lined up along there, right, where the tents are off of the sidewalk and the pedestrians are on the sidewalk. So we have given thought to how might one program this and balancing the fact that these might be interim uses, right? They are interim uses, so we don't want to put, for example, tons of concrete down that we have to pull back out. So, I think you can see we have a small amount of parking surface. We have a pickup, drop-off, and like future food truck, for example, parking could be anywhere up here. And we have strengthened the connection, although I'm not seeing it on this plan, it's not showing the new
The new elevator.
elevator.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
But
it
it's in
should,
that
it should
general.
be on this, but I don't know if we can show a
Is
future.
that the existing underground parking that you're talking about?
No, that's
No.
all gonna be, that's all gonna be
That's all gonna be
removed.
demolished, removed, yeah.
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
So we're still talking about years away from any of that happening. I mean, the first shovel, you say, is not for like 3 years,
Yeah.
2 years, so it'll stay as it is kind of now.
Yeah, probably 27, I think, is what that line.
Yeah, that's when we're gonna start, but,
Power available there or probably not?
There will be.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we do have plans to demolish the garage, so it'll be an improved condition, progressed in condition from what it is right now. They're gonna make you get to the mic. They're gonna make you go to the mic.
What's that, Jim?
The 2 people online.
Yeah, right, the 2 people online. I hope there are more than that. So as some of you know, my name is Adrienne Moomin. I'm a local 20-year resident homeowner, and I am co-founder of the Wheaton Gateway Working Group, a group of concerned citizens in Wheaton Hills and environs. And I am going to bring up the same point that I've been bringing up with you people for the past almost 2 years. I have here the text of an email that was sent in response to my inquiry on April 18th, 2024, wherein I expressed concern about the insane traffic conditions on Veers Mill heading up to the mall, the one food shopping store that we have, the one clothes shopping mall that we have. Super Bowl, Christmas, Thanksgiving, you're sitting there for a half an hour waiting to get in. So you're building 90 units of housing or 180, however many it is, and you haven't done a transportation study. On April 18th, 2024, the email response that came back to me in response to my initial pointing out of this, the Wheaton Gateway Plan will undergo a transportation study that is required as part of the Montgomery County Development Review process. This analysis includes an evaluation of adequacy for pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users, as well as a Vision Zero safety statement. Montgomery County's process specifically does not include an evaluation of motor vehicle adequacy in this area, as the county has strategically chosen to prioritize the aforementioned modes of transportation. This is the key. Although not required by Montgomery County, we are preparing a motor vehicle adequacy evaluation to understand the effects of the site. I have been to every single one of your meetings, either in person or online. You all know me, you know my mouth, you know my face. And I bring this up every single time, and I feel like I get obfuscatory word salads that do not address what I was told in writing on April 18th, 2024. Where is the transportation study that you all claimed you were going to do? You don't live here. You just told us where you live. You don't live here. You don't have to deal with this traffic going to grocery shop in this neighborhood. So people who don't live here are building here and making decisions about what's going to be here, but you're not taking responsibility and doing your obligation to do the traffic study that you said you were going to do on April 18th of 2024.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up again, and thank you for joining us at the meeting here tonight. So you are correct. Well, there's a couple of things that were correct in that statement, that we weren't required to do a traffic study by planning staff, but SHA did ask us to do an adequacy study, or vehicular analysis, rather. We have done that analysis, and it's currently still under review with SHA. And part of this process, this information will become available as soon as we get the completed traffic study or reviewed and the final result. It will become available, just like any other part of this planning review process. Those documents will come available, publicly available. You'll be able to see those. So we have done the study. But to address, I think, what is the crux of your concern, and I'm just going to be really transparent here for a moment, is that we've done the analysis and we're waiting to see what comments come back from staff, but your fears are a little bit legitimized, right? There is going to be increased traffic at these intersections. It's going to be more traffic. The challenge that we have is that staff and the planning board are comfortable in their legislation with that increased level of traffic, right? They have chosen to prioritize different modes of transportation, which we have addressed in their concerns, right? You mentioned that the bicycle transportation, pedestrian transportation, these are the priorities that the sector plan has made, that staff has made on numerous occasions. So while we understand that this could become more challenging, staff has prioritized these modes of transportation and affordability, which we are addressing with our project, and that's the extent of what we're capable of doing at this time.
No, it's not. You could have done this before. The time to do this is before you increase the density, before you started all these town meetings. When this was the hole in the rubber, that was the time to do this, not at the end of the process. And passing the buck on to staff and saying, well, they're prioritizing it. Again, I have your email of April 18th, 2024, where you said you were going to do it and you didn't do it. That's what you all need to cop to. No, it's not okay. You all have a responsibility and an obligation. The first thing on your slide deck says to fit into the existing neighborhood. Guess what? You're crushing it under your boot heel. All of y'all.
Thank you for your feedback. This plan is achieving the vision of a sector plan. The sector plan, which was not by our team, was the result of a years-long effort by stakeholders. I suspect if you were here, you were part of that, that designated what density was going to go where. And in this case, the property that we are redeveloping is redeveloping in accordance with the sector plan that put density in this location. Density means more homes. That meant much needed housing, by the way, in Montgomery County. The county chose, through a very open and community-based process, to designate zoning. That zoning afforded mixed-use housing at high density. With mixed-use housing comes more people. With a large number of people, some number of those people will drive. We've never said that we will not be impacting these roads. What Goyer described is the study that was done at the request of SHA, and we are still in a process of working with SHA. But if you are upset about traffic coming as a result of an increased density that was afforded by a sector plan, your fight is not with us. We are achieving a vision and trying to build a project that meets the myriad of plans that were there. So we're not putting anybody under a boot. That's an inaccurate description of what's happening. We're trying to realize a vision of a community-based plan, And the result of that plan will increase traffic. It will. We're not coming here telling you that we're not going to increase traffic. What we are doing is making significant investments so that folks have alternatives to vehicular travel. That is why you see an investment in a bi-directional bikeway along both of our frontages. It's why we're incorporating a bus rapid transit station into our frontage on Veers Mill Road. Why we're putting 2 new bus stops, one on University and one on Veers Mill Road. It's why we've widened the sidewalks to help achieve the vision of the Complete Streets guidelines and provide for better connectivity. We're providing connectivity to the north of our site by putting a stairwell with a bike runnel. We're providing connectivity for bicycles through the center of our site and signing it for the same, like even cautioning folks who might be riding through. So what you're seeing is the result of a balancing of interests that are in place by that myriad of plans. Go put that slide back up, where all of these plans have guidelines for how the properties are to be redeveloped, including this property. You know, I am sorry that I don't live next to you and I'm not your neighbor to enjoy what is coming here in the form of this building. But it doesn't mean we don't care about the community or that we're trying to hurt the community. We're trying to build an asset to the community, and we're trying to create homes that would fill this place for people who need housing but can't find housing in the county. So the county designated higher density here, and we are reaching the vision of that master plan, and it will provide homes to people, and some of those people will drive. It will increase traffic. No one's trying to avoid anything or get away with anything. You've framed this in the way you've emailed as if someone is taking advantage of you. The project is trying to achieve a vision and doing it in a above code minimum way, and having lots of meetings and being very transparent. So we are sorry that the process with SHA has taken longer than any of us had wanted, but that is the process that we're in. And when we're through that process, we can release the study, but I don't think it's a secret for anybody, as Goyer alluded, is that the intersection doesn't perform particularly well right now. I'm telling you what you already know. And when you add traffic to it, it's not gonna perform any better. That is what is happening. Like, no one's trying to hide this fact or obfuscate our responsibilities in any way. That's just what's happening. And it's there consistent with what the county has tried to encourage us to do. I'm sorry that it's going to increase your traffic at those intersections, but there's just not much we can do in the vehicular realm, and so we're doing everything we can do in the non-vehicular realm to help reduce and provide alternatives.
There's a whole lot you could have done, there's a whole lot you could still do, and you've chosen not to. Have it in writing. Coming from you folks. You told me on April 18th, 2024, you were going to do a transportation study. The time to do it was not after, was before
I think
any of
that the
this.
disconnect here is your presumption that the study was going to result in some type of mitigation in the vehicular realm.
If
That
you
is
had
not
done
the
this,
priority of the
what's
county.
the point of it?
To ask the county, if you have an issue with
You're
how the
passing
county
buck.
prioritizes,
You're passing the buck. You're the developer.
we are the developer who develops in accordance with the laws and rules that are applicable to
And
our
if you want
redevelopment.
to surpass those laws and rules, then this would have been a great way
I'm sorry
to
that we
show-
haven't met your expectations.
to show,
I'm sorry.
no, it's not my
It
expectations.
is yours.
You are now painting me as being unreasonable, and I'm saying
I'd be,
you have
if
not
we would like to share
fulfilled-
your emails where you personally attack me, we can see who's reasonable. But again, I think we've answered your question. We appreciate your interest in your community. We're doing what we can. We have your emails to me personally attacking me. I'm trying to explain what we've explained to you, which is that a study was done, but the process is not done. It was not inaccurate. You can hold your phone. That's the study that I think Goyer was referring to in that email. Is the SHA requested study because we're along 2 state highways? That is the study, but we are still in process with SHA. And while we would like that process to have been completed, It's not yet complete. Nobody's trying to get away with anything here.
And again, I will say the appropriate, responsible way to do it was to do that first, not to get to this point and then we're waiting for the SHA study and it comes when it comes at some point when this is already a done deal. That is what I'm saying, and that is what I've said all along.
I think if staff required some sort of response, which is what I'm assuming that you're saying the study is going to automatically, as Shane said, trigger some sort of improvement. If staff required it, we can't get through the process without that being done. So whether we did this study.
Staff.
Huh?
You're passing the buck to staff. You
We're highlighting the
could have
process.
taken the responsibility to do this ahead of time. You chose not to. That's what I'm saying. Shake your head. Go ahead. Shake your head. You don't want to hear it. Believe me, you don't want to hear, which.
It's okay, Shane. Listen, we understand your concern. When the study is complete, we will share it with you. If staff requires that something needs to be done as a result of that study, we will have to comply.
Responsibility
Whether
to do
we,
it first.
if we did this study 6 months ago, a year ago, if staff required us to do something, if we did a study right before the planning board, if they required us to do something, it would have to be done.
You're talking about going above and beyond. Why not go above and beyond with this? Because staff didn't require it. Staff didn't require all of these other things where you exceeded the, where you went below the legally allowed height, where you did all these things to maximize the bicycle and pedestrian access. And I'm saying this is one area that you very well could have chosen to similarly go above and beyond what is legally required and mandated. And by doing so, you would have shown that you have concern and respect for the people who have been living here and owning property here and paying taxes here for long periods of time who are going to be affected by this. But you didn't choose to do that.
Again, we've heard your concern. Listen, like you said, you've been consistent in your communication with us, as we have as well. And I understand, I think we are doing to the best of our extent, as Shane
This is why
highlighted.
developers have a bad rep.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor or otherwise? Sure.
So I'm having a little trouble seeing things. So so I just want to say that we did get an email, my community, and in fact, it says real clearly, SHA has requested a separate vehicle analysis, and they're going through it now. And they're doing vehicle counts, operation analysis at 6 intersections. I mean, they've got like a laundry list. I'm just saying, I hear you, but we got this from the state because we're with you, okay? I live on East Avenue, or right by East Avenue. So I was wondering if, but you know, they are not wrong in that it's being held up for some reason. They're reviewing it. Everybody's reviewing it. So just saying. Anyway, so I was wondering if you could, I have a couple questions because I'm having difficulty seeing stuff. Okay, can you give me the timeline again that you talked about? I wasn't able to write fast enough or something.
Sure. So we
Beginning in 2026?
is when we plan to start the process of,
Shovel.
no, not permitting.
Permitting.
So we'll develop our drawings. That'll probably take several months, plus or minus 6 months.
Okay.
Submit that to DPS for permitting, and we're hopeful that by the end of the year of 2026,
Okay.
so Q4 2026, we will have a permit in hand and be able to begin construction.
Okay, great. And then what's the next?
Next
after
thing?
that? Yeah.
That we hopefully.
I thought you gave us some other dates, no?
No, the only other date would be early in 2027.
2027.
That we will start construction on the first phase,
Okay.
which is those 2 buildings that
Okay.
we discussed previously.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I think I did ask all my questions. Okay, well, thank you. So this is all going to be on your website, so I'll be able to go through and see everything that I couldn't see because I have vision problems right now. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think that's all.
Thank you. I guess, are there any outstanding questions? Is anyone else online? Okay. Great. Well, I think that brings us to at least the end of the presentation. I think we'll hold for a few more minutes before we decide to wrap things up and see if anything comes in. But otherwise, we appreciate you guys joining us. We appreciate the questions. And keep an eye out. We'll be going to the planning board, hopefully when we identify it in Q4 this year. But thank you.